Midlife is an opportunity to finally tune in, but no one warns you until now that when your body starts changing, your energy drops, your mind feels foggy, and suddenly what worked for you for decades just doesn't anymore. In today's episode of The Well Drop, I'm sitting down with Cynthia Thurlow, a nurse practitioner, functional nutrition expert, and leading voice in women's metabolic health, who has helped thousands of women better understand what's actually happening in their bodies during midlife. We're diving into the powerful insights from her new book, The Menopause Gut, which explores the critical connection between your hormones, your microbiome, and how you actually feel day to day. This is not your typical hormone conversation because we're going to get into why midlife can feel like an identity shift, not just a physical one, what's actually driving stubborn weight gain, brain fog, and burnout, and the deeper layer most people avoid, from generational patterns to stored stress that often starts to surface during this phase. So if you've been feeling off and can't quite explain why this episode will help you connect the dots and start to understand what your body is asking for. So let's dive in. If you love diving into the latest wellness secrets on the podcast, then you're going to want to join my exclusive weekly newsletter. Get insider wellness tips you won't hear anywhere else. Be the first to know about my upcoming fasting workshops because, let's be real, fasting is the secret weapon for surviving perimenopause. Access my weekly essentials, tools, and biohacks to help you thrive in midlife. I promise to make it worth your while, straight to the point, no fluff, just powerful tips to help you feel your best every single week. Don't miss out. Sign up now at thewelldrop.com. Let's take your wellness to the next level together. Thank you for being with us on The Well Drop, Cynthia.
Oh, so I've been looking forward to this conversation, Amber. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. And I'm so excited for your new book. I think that I love to always talk about the things we weren't warned about. And I don't think most people realize that your gut starts to change as your hormones change. Like, there is definitely not this like gut hormone connection that we are aware of, especially in our 30s. Would you agree with that?
No, and I think it's interesting because really it's maybe been the last 5-10 years that more and more research has come out about the importance of the gut microbiome. And let's at least define what that is, because for a lot of people, they're like, I know where my brain is, I know where my heart is, I know where my stomach is, and where is the gut microbiome? Somewhere in the digestive tract. So it's 40 trillion bacteria, viruses, fungi, and protozoa that are part of this little ecosystem in our large intestine or colon. And it interfaces with every single organ in the body. Like, there's a gut bone axis, there's a gut brain axis, there's a gut ovarian axis. And it heavily influences not just the trajectory of us aging, but our entire health. And I think as more research comes out, we'll probably start taking it more seriously. But it was something that I felt like was really left out of the conversation. And so I jokingly say, if you think perimenopause and menopause is just slapping on an estrogen patch, you're missing a much more nuanced conversation. And so I think on a lot of different levels, just building awareness around gut health and how it's changing, I think for a lot of women, just that awareness allows them to understand like things at a much deeper level without getting super sciencey. It's just making the information accessible. And certainly, like my generation, we didn't even talk about perimenopause. We all just hit it like a wall and
It
slid
was
down the
never a
wall.
phase. Like, growing up, there was no phase of life that you knew about even called
No.
perimenopause. Like, you had babies and you knew at some point in your 50s there was menopause. I mean, even being in the wellness space, I didn't even know about perimenopause until I guess the terms probably started to really come to the forefront 5 years ago. Like, I'm 45, so I was only just turning 40, and I wasn't even thinking, oh, there's like this phase and thing. I knew things would start to change like around 42, 43, but I didn't know that there could be this like 6 to 10 year
Yeah.
window of
Yep.
chaos.
Well, and I can tell you in 2018, I decided to do a TED Talk, and I was both embarrassed to talk about perimenopause. But at that time, this will blow your mind. In 2018, there were 4 TED Talks on menopause, which is why they agreed to let me talk about
Wow.
perimenopause. And I remember when I stood on stage, I was like, this should be like no different than me talking about any other phase in a woman's life. And yet I was so embarrassed because like women in my generation kind of grew up feeling uncomfortable talking about the aging process. And yet I think perimenopause is this incredible opportunity to show up so much differently in
Yeah.
our lives and feel much more authentic. And so, 2018 was 8 years ago. So it's not a surprise that you weren't even aware of perimenopause until 5 years ago, because I didn't know about and I'm a licensed medical provider. No one taught me about it until I remember I walked into my GYN's office and I was remarking that my periods were really heavy. And so, she did an internal exam. I happened to have my period start that day. She was like, "Oh my gosh, your cycle's so heavy." And she offered me the pill, an IUD, an ablation, or, if you're done having kids, let's just pull your uterus out.
This I hear all
Yeah,
the time.
those were the four options I was given. And I remember I knew enough to exit the exam room, check out and leave. And I effectively fired her and found a midwife, because I was like, I don't want to do any of those things. There has to be a better way. And so I think for a lot of women in the conventional system, those are the tools that the gynecologists have. And so I'm not being critical. I'm just talking about, like, there's traditional allopathic medicine and they're only given so many tools in the toolbox. And all of those things would have fixed my heavy menstrual cycles, but didn't actually address the underlying issue for why my cycles were so heavy.
And I think that that's like a perfect thing to just like pause on for someone to who's listening to really understand how this is just how the system these doctors were taught. They didn't actually know that there can be other
Yeah.
solutions, and it was only for people like yourself and like me who are like, wait, there has to be another way, and like are advocating for themselves to say, let me just like wait a minute. And I think in the doctor's office, because even still today, all these years later, birth control is usually the first thing. I have many people that I know that that's what they're given. And then the second thing is about like the removal or
Mhm.
IUD and or a removal. And so I just would love to like tell people that like you are an NP, you are in this industry and you didn't even know that there
Yeah.
could be other solutions out there. So just
Not
let
at that
somebody say
time.
like, just don't take the first suggestion as like, that's all there
Yeah.
is to do.
Well, and it's interesting because I arguably trained at, if not the leading medical university in the United States, one of them, and not in my undergraduate curriculum at Johns Hopkins, not in graduate school. Were there any other options provided to us? And so it's the system that is designed to address symptoms. And let me be clear, like traditional allopathic medicine, if you are really sick or you urgently or emergently need surgery, there is
Then
no one
great.
better. But
Exactly.
when it comes to prevention and chronic disease management, we don't do such a stellar job. So for me, I was so frustrated with not only being told it's normal to gain weight, it's normal to have cycles this heavy, it's normal to just give oral contraceptives to fix this issue. It really forced me to look very introspectively at the traditional model and decide for myself that I wanted more than that. And 10 years ago there weren't as many options, and yet I was able to navigate in a system and find the right people for me, which included getting started on thyroid replacement, getting really aggressive about lifestyle modifications and nutrition to kind of amend, and even utilizing oral progesterone to help balance out these incredibly heavy cycles. And yet, I always want to be respectful of my peers, but I think for a lot of women, especially our generations of women, they want more than just conventional options. And so I think that, certainly like your platform and just bringing awareness to the fact that women have options, because we're kind of conditioned to just shut up. We're kind of conditioned to just accept the
Not
status
even ask questions, right? I
quo.
always say awareness is fully the first step. And that
Mhm.
once you have the awareness and to know that there is more than one choice, like starting with lifestyle habits for me is like the starting point. That if you start and do a few changes there, it might actually just fix everything. Imagine if then everything is fine. And then if not, so then you know that there are some other things and tools in the toolbox, but you don't have to just go straight to like, a pharmaceutical, because that also everything comes with potential side effects. It's not
Yes.
like the end all be all. And I do love that you said that when people, I think HRT, thank God, is now having a moment and it's
Mhm.
back on the table. But for people who think like, I'm just going to take hormones and everything's fine, they're totally forgetting that there's a huge lifestyle piece in this midlife. time of our life that like is not to be an afterthought. Like when you were writing this book, what did you feel is like something that women haven't been told about in midlife for when
Oh
things
God. I
start to
mean, so
change?
much about how, because I start the book off talking about this romantic vacation I took with my husband, and we ate the same food in Morocco, and I got violently ill and he didn't. And I didn't at the time understand why that had happened. I was like, I'm just unlucky. No, it's our physiology is changing with the decline in hormones. So I think the things that I was thinking about that were really relevant to women was, do most women know that our immune system changes with this decline in hormones? Do most women know that their bone health is highly dependent on gut health? Do most women know that early childhood trauma and trauma as a young adult impacts when we go into menopause? It actually ages our ovaries. And so I think on a fundamental level, there's so much wonderful information coming out about perimenopause and menopause and hormone replacement therapy and the value of GLP-1s, if that's appropriate, and lifestyle. But yet the lens on the gut has not been one that people are focusing on. And when I stumbled upon all this, because I have a podcast of my own and I would interview experts, and I always take a little bit away from every single guest, like something that they've taught me. It's like a nugget of gold.
Yep.
And when my publisher reached out to me in 2024 and she said, "Do you think you have a second book in you?" I said, "Yes, I think. And here's my idea." And I literally wrote a one-page, I kind of like the gestalt of the book. Now, normally when you write a book proposal, it's like 100 pages long.
Yeah.
This was one. And so she literally got one page of my idea and green lighted the project and said, "Run with it, because this is so
Wow.
unique and so different." And yet I feel really fortunate, blessed that I was able to synthesize all this information in a way that's really accessible, because it is incredibly unique. It's also very complementary to other works that other experts have put out there already. And I think it's helpful because now we're going to have so many resources that are going to be able to help women. And I always say, not everyone can work with me as a patient, but they can definitely work with me because I've put all of this, like I always say, this is like a love letter to women. It's all the things I wish I had known. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I always say, if I didn't know as an NP, how would I expect the layperson to know? Or most clinicians, like as I go on podcasts, these physicians and nurse practitioners are like, "Oh my God, no one ever taught me this."
No
And
one taught
so
me.
it becomes this domino effect of, like, if you think about the impact of our work, I think this is where books can be particularly powerful, because you can capture all this wisdom and someone can either listen to it or read it and be able to take tangible things away. Like one of the things that I really made a huge effort in writing The Menopause Gut was, I don't want it to all just be about bright, shiny objects, because let's be clear, in the health and wellness space, we have lots of fun gadgets. But it
Yes,
does
there's
not
lots of
really,
things. Like we're trying to like sift through the noise here. Like
yeah,
what are like a core thing? Cause like when someone's thinking the gut, they're immediately gonna think probiotics.
yeah.
Like is that like what somebody's like first thing should be that they're thinking about?
No, I mean, when I think about the very first things that I talk to patients about, it's number one is sleep quality, because sleep and your gut are intricately interconnected. You have a vagus nerve, you have a super highway of information that goes back and forth between the brain and the gut. Number two is stress management. And how many women in middle
So
age,
hard.
this joke. I was like, tell me a woman who doesn't sleep and tell me a woman who doesn't manage her stress.
Mhm.
Stress management. And we know that stress can be both good, like hormetic stress, like you and I are talking. If you measured our cortisol, it's probably up a little bit because we're engaged and we're excited and we're having this conversation. But like chronic stress is what I'm talking about. It's the stuff that breaks down our muscles. It, reduces our ability to fight infections. It can lead to leaky gut. Chronic stress is what becomes really debilitating. So like managing your stress and nutrition, like, oh my gosh, I tell people all the time, 70% of Americans eat just solely ultra processed foods. And we know the additives, the chemicals, the emulsifiers, the artificial sugars can be particularly damaging to the gut microbiome. And so I think about things on a very foundational level, that before we go to probiotics, before we go to like medications, and there's a time and a place for that, let me be clear, it's the foundational elements that have to be addressed. Because if you're not sleeping and you're not managing your stress and you're eating garbage diet, I can guarantee you your gut health is going to suffer. And
Yep.
so unfortunately, I think because of our traditional allopathic model, we think that supplements will fix lifestyle related issues.
Yes, we want
And
just like the magic thing. And I
yes,
think that's a problem is that like the lifestyle piece, like the sleep and the stress and what you're eating, it's not sexy. So it's not going to go viral on TikTok or Instagram. It's not like, I was like, we have to figure out a way to make it cool because this is the stuff that really moves the needle. Like I have a whole thing like set your bedroom up to sleep like a baby. And
mhm,
that to some people might just seem stupid, but it's actually not. It's like a core thing that we need to like kind of upgrade in midlife and take a moment to become aware of like, what is the light like in my room? How is the sound? Where am I charging my phone? Like some of these basic things that we don't realize is actually like interrupting us from
mhm.
getting this good quality sleep. And the same thing with like the food. Like we become this package society, especially as busy moms. It's a grab and go. And I just try to tell people, let's just go back to eating real food. Again, not so sexy, but like not such a novel idea. Like we always ate real food, like things that didn't come from a machine or in a bag. Like that's all you need to do. It's not that complicated, but it's just not that marketable at the same
Right.
time.
No, you're absolutely correct. And I will tell patients major in the majors, meaning if you are not moving your body, you're not eating high quality food, you're not managing your stress, you're not sleeping, all the things that I talk about, like you have to focus on those things first because one thing that perimenopause forces us to do, I look at it as a litmus test. How well are you taking care of yourself? Maybe you didn't do such a stellar job in your 20s and 30s. We weather that a whole lot better. But with those alterations in hormones and neurotransmitters, the wheels will fall off the bus. I mean, it certainly did for me. And I love to be transparent because people assume I've got it all together all the time. It's only because I had to make some drastic changes. And I think for a lot of women, it doesn't necessarily have to be drastic, but we do have to go to bed earlier. We do have to, do more than 5 minutes of meditation once a week. We do have to determine, are we in a toxic relationship? Are we in a toxic job situation? Are we in an unhealthy situation overall? I think for a lot of women, it forces them to really get honest and clear about, is their lifestyle working for them or against them?
Yeah.
And with that awareness, we can then make better choices. Because I think, my grandmother said something to me really invaluable at 18. She said, one of the most important decisions you will ever make is who you marry, which I thought was hilarious because I was like, whatever, I'm never getting married. And I did get married in my 30s. But here's the thing that I can tell you without question. How many of my girlfriends got divorced in their 40s because they realized, maybe they didn't realize in their 20s or 30s, but they're like, they woke up one day and were like, whoa, wait a minute, this person is not the right fit for me, is not healthy for me, whatever the reasons are. But I think a lot of our stress in life or the benefit of being with the right partner, you don't necessarily have to be coupled, but I think for a lot of people, they don't realize that a lot of choices we've made when we were younger can make our life harder or easier in perimenopause. Like I jokingly say, if a man or your partner can make it through perimenopause with you,
Then you're good.
you've got a good person. I mean,
Yeah.
that's right. Because I think for a lot of partners, it becomes very confusing to try to figure out like why someone's upset one day and happy the next, or why
Yeah.
someone, I mean,
It's
so
hard
much.
on the guys, as hard as it can be on us as women. I also would love to learn like what were your like little signs and shifts that you had to make. But like it is easily just as easily because I've had friends who've had to, have surgeries and put themselves into, menopause in their late 30s. And so that obviously changes all your hormones. And there's an adjustment for the husband that they're also not warned about what happens to the woman because their mother didn't talk about
No,
it. Hopefully that'll change for like the next
yeah.
generation. Like my son knows so much about perimenopause. Hopefully there'll be like a semblance of some sympathy or at least the expectation to know like this is a phase and a chapter of life, right? Like if you just don't know that that's even a thing, like we didn't even know it was a thing for ourselves, how can our partner even have a clue as to what's going on? Because I think I feel bad for the guys that they usually probably think it's themselves when it's
Yeah.
nothing to do with them at all.
Yeah. Well, I think a guest on my podcast recently stated that 70% of the divorces are initiated by women. And I wonder how many of those divorces could have been prevented
Yeah.
if there was more understanding up front, because I think in a lot of ways, the poor sleep, not being able to manage your stress quite as effectively, just being irritable. Like I remember saying to my husband, I remember just being so irritable and I didn't understand why. And that wasn't my personality. And
Yeah.
yet I think that if men understood what was coming, they could probably be more empathetic and more supportive. And by the same token, I think if women knew it was coming, it's like reverse puberty. Like the irony being, when I was in perimenopause, my kids were in puberty, and I was like, "Isn't this ironic?"
It
If you
always
time it exactly, if you time it
happens.
properly, I had 2 kids in puberty, and then I'm going through perimenopause. And I think for a lot of people, we do a whole lot better if we know what to anticipate as opposed to the abyss. That's how I felt. Like it was the
Yeah.
abyss of trying to figure it all out and then trying to figure out like where you fall in time and space when all of a sudden nothing, it's almost like the upside down world. Like you're like suddenly everything that used to work, all my habits that got me to be a very successful person suddenly are maladaptive in perimenopause. What is that? Like,
That is what I hear all the time. What used
yep.
to work just stopped working. And I think that's like what shocks women. And then they just feel lost and confused and overwhelmed. And then like the Instagram algorithm gets them. And then they're just like out of their minds. Like,
Yep.
what were like some early signs for you? Because all of these symptoms, I think I used to probably blame like mommy brain for
Yes,
brain fog
exactly.
stuff, like for missing my keys or where's my phone. But I never thought, oh my God, it's probably my hormones
Yep,
shifting. That
absolutely.
never came to my mind until
Yeah.
later.
So I had my first pregnancy at 34 and my second at 36. So just to give everyone context, so when I was in my late 30s, I attributed a lot of like the fatigue, the anxiety around my cycle. Like I had never had mood issues, but I just felt like I had kind of a flat, like I just didn't feel like I was, we used the term anhedonia, which is a fancy way of saying like we just felt kind of bleh.
Like,
I recall just having trouble sleeping and I was like, what? And I figured I've got a, at that point when I was 40, I had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I was like, oh, it's because I'm exhausted. I work as an NP. My husband travels a ton. I'm really doing a lot of solo parenting. We had a puppy. It was
that's
like,
a lot.
yeah, it was a lot. And 2 very active little boys. So like, anyone that's listening that has little kids, it's a wonderful, conscious, exhausting time in your life. And so I think for me, it was trouble sleeping, anxiety, and then just feeling blah. And then just the other thing was the degree of irritability that I had never had. Like I was never someone who had bad PMS. And so for me, it was like middle of my cycle, so grumpy. And I just chalked it up to I'm just sleep deprived and I have too much on my plate. And
Yeah.
so those were kind of my beginnings. But I think the big thing that woke me up to something was up was that I had never had problems after pregnancies, losing weight. And I suddenly became incredibly weight loss resistant. And I was like, what in the hell is going on with my body?
Interesting. And you were
Um,
young. I mean, in your early 40s.
yep. And yet, my internist said to me, Cynthia, you're 42, 43. This is just the way things are. You're middle age now. And I was like,
Wow. Yeah.
Um, do you think maybe there's a reason why I can't lose weight? Like, is my thyroid off? Is it, at that time, I didn't even think it was, a macros thing or too intense exercise or whatever it was I was doing. And so I go back to like fired my provider and found someone else that like actually dug a little deeper and we're like, yeah, your thyroid, you like are desperately need some thyroid replacement. And so I think for a lot of individuals, they're kind of gaslit. Like they're told that it's normal to be tired, it's normal to not sleep well,
They
it's normal to gain
normalize.
weight. And when you're 5'3",
Yeah, we're like
10
the
pounds
same
makes a big
size.
difference on a short
2
person.
pounds makes a big difference.
Yes.
And I always say, it's okay to switch doctors. I think we're not kind of told that it's okay that your doctor may not serve you in this chapter
Correct.
and it's okay to go somewhere else. I think we are naturally loyal as
Yes.
women, right? You find someone, they've been with us, they really know us, but they just may not be equipped for this chapter. And it's not their fault. It's just because they weren't taught it. And unless you seek, more education outside the system, maybe they're not the best at connecting the dots. And it's a complicated time. We're complicated beings, which is why we weren't probably in clinical studies for so long. Um, but I do think the weight is probably where that's where like it feels like the rails are coming off? Why is it always the midsection? I call it like the estrogen pooch.
Yeah, I mean, here's the sad thing. The only hormone that goes up in middle age is cortisol. So we have 40 times more cortisol receptors in our abdomens. So there's two reasons why we may see shifts in body. Well, there's multiple reasons, but like the two big ones that I think about is with like unyielding stress and cortisol being high, you're going to have more fat deposition in your abdominal area. But there's also, we're more likely to accumulate visceral fat, which is the pathologic bad fat that's around visceral organs that's deep. It's not the pesky kind of subcutaneous fat that we all get irritated with, that we might have on our butts or our thighs. It's the deeper visceral fat that becomes problematic. And so I think for a lot of women, that's their tell. It's like, oh, I've been managing my stress pretty well. And then all of a sudden you're like, no, I'm not managing my stress pretty well because I'm realizing my body composition is changing. And so there's other things that contribute to those body composition shifts. But I think for a lot of women, it's really frustrating because what they're told is, oh, we've had a couple babies. You're middle aged, you're not moving as much. Maybe you eat too much. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
I think
I
it's
had a doctor
very
tell me eat less and exercise
exercise
more.
more. Yep. I
At
can
like 36. I
yep.
was
I
like,
can honestly tell you that I probably told my patients that in my 20s as an NP. I was a young NP, and that's what we were taught.
oh, that
And
is what you're taught. They
yes,
actually teach you that.
exercise more, eat less. And yet we
Wow.
know exercise is a terrible way to lose weight. Full stop.
If you love diving into the latest wellness secrets on the podcast, then you're going to want to join my exclusive weekly newsletter. Get insider wellness tips you won't hear anywhere else. Be the first to know about my upcoming fasting workshops because let's be real, fasting is the secret weapon for surviving perimenopause. Access my weekly essentials, tools, and biohacks to help you thrive in midlife. I promise to make it worth your while, straight to the point, no fluff, just powerful tips to help you feel your best every single week. Don't miss out. Sign up now at thewelldrop.com. Let's take your wellness to the next level together. And I think in midlife, I mean, from what I've seen, because I'd love to, I don't know how you feel about the Dutch test, but I love the Dutch test because it can show you your cortisol pathways in a different way than just a blood work. And I do see high, when your cortisol is higher and people can't settle down at night, that will show on the test because you're doing it over 24 hours. But people aren't connecting that cortisol, gut, estrogen combination. So related that now back to the gut, like, is there something that we could do to help kind of balance that out if we already kind of lock in some of those lifestyle things that you mentioned before?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a lot that goes on with the gut. I mean, obviously, like chronic stress is going to lead to leaky gut. Women are 4 to 5 times more likely to develop leaky gut, and leaky gut is what leads to not only underlying food sensitivities because you provoke an immune response when you have leaky gut, but it's also like we see a rise in lupus, rheumatoid, Hashimoto's, celiac, et cetera. There's over 100 autoimmune conditions now, including like chronic Lyme
Yeah.
and long haul COVID. And so I think for a lot of people, like they don't realize till they get that diagnosis. Like I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's and I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. I don't have a leaky gut. And they're like, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. And so what precipitated that is like chronic stress, antibiotic use, even if it's appropriate, toxin exposure. I go back to the chronic stress because so many women are like, oh, I'm like we see a duck gliding across a pond. They look very calm on the top. Underneath, they're paddling furiously. And so I said,
Oh,
that is
yeah.
what most of my patients are doing. They look calm on the outside
That's
and they're
all of us.
stressed on the inside. And I think for a lot of us, we're just wired a certain way. And so whether that's, childhood experiences, young adult experiences, just being super type A, we have to learn how to kind of decompress and learn how to manage our stress. Working on that vagal nerve training is really important. So can you do things to improve gut health? Absolutely. But it is going to start with those basics of understanding if you don't get a good night's sleep, that impacts your gut bacteria. If you don't manage your stress, it impacts your gut bacteria. It impacts your susceptibility to leaky gut. Same thing with nutrition. Same thing with exercise. It's this Goldilocks effect of the right amount of exercise. So women get really mad when I say this, but I'm going to say it. If you're doing Orange Theory Fitness 6 days a week with no recovery or CrossFit, or you're doing marathon after marathon, guess what? you will get a transient leaky gut because of the intensity, but your body needs more of the restorative stuff, like
Yeah.
yin yoga, zone 2 cardio, which is like at a comfortable pace. Oftentimes less is more in middle age.
Yes, I say
Or
that all the time. Nobody wants to hear it, but I often, it's funny because when these shifts start to happen, and because as women, we're like going to like fight to the death, people then start to go in overdrive on the workouts, right? Like I'll hear from people, I'm working out harder than ever. I'm doing these hot Pilates classes and I'm doing some strength training. Usually it's not enough strength training, but I'm
Mhm,
fatter than ever. And I'll be like, drop the hot classes. You're spiking your cortisol.
mhm.
When are you doing these classes? Because most of us, in order to fit in, I also think your cortisol rises in the morning. You're having
Yep.
coffee, you're rising it even more. You put a workout on top of that, it's rising even more. So then your body's going to just start holding. So I like to suggest people to like push your workouts a little bit later or skip, if you can, the caffeine in the morning, but usually we kind of need that. And really, we have to sort of parent ourselves like we do our children. We have to be a little bit more gentle. And I love that you are validating that because I see it time and time again. We always think harder, better, more is
Mhm.
better. Less is more here.
Yeah, and I think that's hard
It's
for my
hard.
type A's to understand. I'm like, "Listen, if I were to tell you what I do now for workouts versus what I did 10 years ago," I'm like,
So
"Listen, I
different.
sleep in. I don't get I mean, unless I have to get on an early flight. I do not get up early. I used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to the gym, and then go to the hospital, round on patients, and I did that for years. And I think about it now, and I'm like, I'd rather get the sleep. Like, you start realizing that
To value it,
you have
actually.
to value it, and it's also, like, just boundaries in general about your personal life. Like, there was someone, I forget which kind of mindset expert on Instagram had this incredible post that was talking about, like, as you get older, you have less real friends.
They always say
And I
that.
was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so much my life." I have a sibling who I love dearly who always has a ton of people at his house every weekend. He and his wife love entertaining, and I love their friends. But I'm like, my husband and I like a smaller group of friends. We like less people in our house. And so I was saying, well, finally, it's been validated as an introvert. That's actually better for me. Like, I don't
Yeah.
feel the sense of pressure that I have to be part of this big, huge friend group. And so I think it really impacts us on every level. Like, we have more boundaries around our personal life. We have more boundaries around our business. We have more boundaries around everything we're doing because we're realizing time is precious. Being really conscientious about and intentional about where our energy goes is how we protect ourselves.
Oh, yeah. It's
Even when
everything.
even when I go to events, I've now gotten very specific about when I speak at events, how long I stay at the event, what are the expectations of the person that's organizing it. Because as an introvert, I can get on stage and do my talk and connect with people afterwards and before. But then I'm like, I need to recharge my batteries. And
Yeah.
so I think for everyone listening, it's identifying that we actually do better in middle age doing less. And that is hard to wrap our heads around because we've been conditioned to believe that we should multitask, that we should be doing 50 things at once, that the to-do list should be managed. Like,
Yeah.
there's a book
Get
called
it all done. And I
Yeah.
loved that. Like I am super type A. I mean, my schedule is packed, not for the better, but I always say like your 40s is an amazing chapter. I call it you kind of like don't give a fuck kind of energy. You sort of like that's like how the beginning starts. And then you start the boundary setting, but you need to take a moment to like understand like kind of what serves you and what doesn't.
Mhm.
And going back actually to our partners, you just made me think like my husband, it was probably like 2 years ago that I was like, I can't handle going out more than like at the most twice a week. My preference is once a week. And so anything that was beyond that, I'd just be like, no, even if it was with our best friends. And our best friends would be like, is Amber antisocial? I am super social. But it was literally, I was like starting boundary setting. And my husband at first was like, what's wrong with you? Because I'm always a yes girl. And I was like, I can't physically handle it. Like my energy is everything. Like I want to feel good and energized so I can like do all the things I want to during the day. I'm a morning person, I'm a day person. And by the end of the day, like I'm done and I don't want to like have to push myself. Of course I could do it, but it wasn't worth like the energy
Yeah.
suck that would happen at the end. And so I was like, we'll just have to like push off like those like plans and we just can't like pile it all in at once. Like it just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah,
unfortunately. Like, I
no,
wish it could, but it doesn't.
no, and it's interesting because my husband's a even larger introvert than I am, so it's easy on a Friday night when I say I don't want to do anything because I've been
He's like,
talking all
"Yes."
day. He's like, "That's fine." And we have wonderful neighbors, and we crack up that all of us are introverts, and so we'll say like all the time, like, "You live across the street. We should be getting together more often." And then everyone's also in the same life stage, like we're almost at that open door slash empty nest time frame. And so we're like, but sometimes it's just so nice not to have to talk.
Yeah, I agree. Right, and especially when you're, like, doing this kind of work, it's like we're putting so much out there, so sometimes we have to protect, like, a little bit of those I have to,
Mhm.
like, force myself to find those quiet moments, but
Yeah.
I think you do have an easier time doing it once you are aware of, like, where you wanna put your time and energy. Like, I think that's back to that whole awareness piece, like, becoming aware, and I think connecting the gut to so much I didn't realize about, like, the gut-bone connection. To me, that is fascinating because
Yeah.
most women never think about that. They just think
No,
about calcium.
no. And it's fascinating to me. Like when I started stumbling upon the research, I was like, oh my God, leaky bone, leaky gut, and how appropriately we've identified estrogen as this primary prevention tool for osteoporosis. But yet, no one's talking about the fact that if your gut isn't healthy, it doesn't matter how much estrogen you're taking, you are going to get more bone breakdown
Yeah.
than more bone buildup. And so, from my perspective, and certainly, working with tens of thousands of women over the past 10 years, it's just really reaffirmed for me why it's so important to think comprehensively and not just myopically on like one strategy is going to fix everybody. It's important. Let me be very clear. I'm so happy that hormone replacement therapy is getting the attention it deserves. However, it's not just about replenishing hormones, although that's a very important component because it won't fix, if you don't sleep and you don't manage your stress and you have a standard American diet and you don't exercise, yes, hormone replacement therapy will be helpful, but not as much as the lifestyle piece. And I think for a lot of individuals, because we've conditioned patients to believe a pill will take away their lifestyle ills. I mean, I worked in clinical cardiology for 16 years. Let me be very clear. I did a lot of prescription management. I did a lot of lifestyle management. And 95% of the time, my patients would say, I'm not going to stop smoking. I'm not going to change my diet. I'm not going to become more physically active. Just write the script for the higher dose of blood pressure medicine or for the lipid piece or
Yeah.
my diabetes medication, just increase it. And I would always say to them, wouldn't you like to be on less medicine? Like, how about that as a thought? Like, let's not shame people into feeling that there's anything wrong with taking medications.
Nothing. Just like
However,
the minimum viable necessary.
correct. And I don't count hormone replacement therapy as medicine. I counted that as like, that is what makes the difference between thriving versus surviving middle age. But I think for a lot of individuals, I hear people in the integrative medicine space who will like shame people like, well, I'm not on any medicines. I'm like, good for you. But some people, maybe they've done everything they can to manage their lipids, which are a disaster, and they do need a medication. I mean, I actually take a medicine called Zetia for my crappy genetic pool that I have that, even with optimized lifestyle stuff. And so I share that so that no one feels any sense of shame if they do indeed have to be on a medication. Cause it's like you do the lifestyle piece first. And then if you need a medication,
Exactly.
then,
Then
right, then you
And
let
then
it
I
be.
think a lot of people do I say they do good things, but sometimes in the wrong order. So it's
Correct.
like start with the lifestyle. If it's not fixed, then you can add whatever is necessary on top of that. But a lot of times they're just adding the thing, not doing the lifestyle. So I say they're not even optimizing to get what they want if it's a medicine for it to do for them, because it could even be so much more if they locked in the lifestyle piece along with it. It's like a two-part
Absolutely.
system. It's not just like
Yes.
a one part. So I love that you are reiterating that because I say that all the time that lifestyle is number one. If we can just remember to start there. And who knows, it just might make things so much easier. And then if you feel better, like it's like the domino effect of like
Yes.
so many good things start to like happen from then on out. One last thing I want to circle and touch upon because I think it's so fascinating because I've been seeing this is like, what is the element of generational stress and why does that start to surface in this chapter? Because I feel like that was never talked about or warned about, but I'm seeing it a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I started writing the book, there were a couple things that shocked me. One was about this gut bone axis. The other one was the impact of adverse childhood events. And let's even back up further and talk about epigenetic changes that are related to previous generations. Because, I think that the more I understand about my family lineage, the more my life makes sense now that I'm a grown adult. But I think it's helpful for people to understand that stress over time changes us epigenetically, so down at a cellular level. And that can be expressed in different ways. Like, I fervently believe that the stress that my grandmothers and grandparents experienced imprinted my parents, which imprinted me. And it means that I can either carry on maladaptive patterns and issues, or they can stop with me. So when I talk about adverse childhood events, we're talking about, anyone that's listening can go online. It was a joint venture between Kaiser Permanente and the CDC, and it's a very quick quiz. But we know when we talk about big T trauma, I think everyone would recognize that rape, murder, suicide are big T trauma. When I trained in inner city Baltimore, that's all I thought trauma was. Now we understand there's this other insidious little T trauma. That's abuse, neglect, whether it's verbal, physical, emotional, etc. And that can be equally toxic. And so I think what's interesting is when you look at the body of the research, how this rewires us, these early experiences rewire our autonomic nervous system, which is our nervous system, and can make us ensure that our cortisol levels remain elevated. So we're in this kind of, for lack of a better way to explain it, a sympathetic dominant state, which a lot of people, frankly, in our modern day lifestyle live
Are
in.
naturally.
So you add the gasoline of, if you have a lot of adverse childhood events, that can rewire you in unique ways. It can make you more susceptible to poor metabolic health, disordered relationships with food, et cetera, et cetera. And what's interesting is that impacts the gut microbiome, because remember I talked about chronic stress is caustic and can lead to impacting our immune system, can make us more likely to get opportunistic infections, more likely to have autoimmune conditions. Once you have one autoimmune condition, you're prone to more. I had my first in my 20s after getting treated for Lyme appropriately with antibiotics. But what's interesting is that chronic exposure to cortisol activation can age the ovaries. So our ovaries are the most mitochondrial dense organ in our bodies, not surprisingly, because they're responsible for creating life. They're also incredibly susceptible to cortisol. Cortisol can be at a high level,
Fascinating.
can age the ovaries. So there's solid research suggesting that people that have high adverse childhood event scores may go into menopause earlier. That has been my clinical experience. And there was a bit of research that another physician mentioned on my podcast where it talked about, if a woman is sexually abused as a child, goes on to have children that are sexually abused, she will go into menopause 8 years earlier than her peers. Average age here in the United States is 51. I want everyone to think about that. It doesn't have to be as horrific as the experience of sexual abuse as a child and then having children that go on to be sexually abused. But it just goes to show you the imprinting of that cortisol response if your body doesn't feel safe. And so I think for a lot of women, maybe women who have never admitted what they went through as children to anyone else, it imprints your body in really unique and profound ways. And so
Fascinating.
I think one of the things that I felt like was a big takeaway from the book was a whole chapter on like stress. And before we were talking about like fluffy stress, like, intensely exercising, or,
Yeah.
you're stressed because your cat got sick or whatever it is. But like the really insidious nature of high adverse childhood event scores and how that ages us and impacts the way that our health goes, to me was a whoa. Like, I literally remember my editor saying, holy cow.
You're blowing my mind right now because
Yeah.
I almost died at 1 year old. I had JRA at 11, Crohn's disease at 14. So I guess I would be categorized as adverse sort of health
Yeah.
childhood
Yeah.
events. But then I've been dealing with my son the last 6 years on his autoimmune journey, which has been this huge mystery of like trying to put the pieces together. And the one thing in my biological age, I've done a handful, is my metabolic system is aging like a 51-year-old when the rest of me is 34.
Yeah.
But I never connected the dots on
Yeah.
that is all stress related.
Yeah.
I really think my son is a big piece because I don't really have any trauma from like my childhood stuff for some reason. If anything, it's like I feel like a gift because it like led me into living this wellness lifestyle since 94, and set me free in a way. But definitely the last 6 years, the stress, I mean,
Yeah.
a stress of like a child who's like
Yeah.
unwell, quote
Yeah.
unquote. I mean, I'm sure that must, because I was just having a conversation before this conversation of like, I don't understand like why my metabolic system is so old. Like, what is the problem? But it has to be
Stress.
stress because like I'm
Yeah.
so healthy. Otherwise,
And I
it's
mean, what
weird.
my cousin said to me years ago when my kids were younger, she said, "You're only as happy as your most unhappy
Yes.
child." And so that left me with this like really heavy feeling of realizing like as mothers, we carry everything with
Oh,
us. And so even if, this is the way things were imprinted and this is the way your son was going to grow up, or, my younger son is kind of like my child that I'm always looking at, like, is he okay?
man.
Um, I think for each one of us, like as moms, we're just so connected to our children that I'm sure the stress of watching the issues with his health kind of evolve are very like weigh heavily on you is what
Yeah,
I'm acknowledging.
100%. Like it has to. Well, this was so insightful. I'm so excited for your book. Where can we find you?
Probably easiest to go to my website. So www.cynthiathurlow.com. If you look at the top of the website, there's a banner where you can purchase the Menopause Gut. Um, you're the retailer of your choice. I always say if you have a brick and mortar bookstore, try to give them your business because I think the online stores are really making it hard for brick and mortar businesses. But I'm active across social media. I would say right now I'm really concentrated on growing Substack. That's kind of been my passion project. I have a podcast called Everyday Wellness, which is absolutely one of my favorite things I do in my business. I love interviewing people. I'm an introvert, so I love to be the person asking all the questions and being able to kind of absorb all of the incredible gifts that my guests have. But I'm active all across social media. I've got a free Facebook group. It's called the Midlife Pause / my name, which was originally the title of the book. And I keep reminding my team, I'm like, maybe we should change the title of the book of the free Facebook group. But there are men and women in there. It's a no drama place, but it's a good place where my team and I answer questions a couple days a week. But I'm
I love that.
also I'm the kind of person that if you message me on social media, I might actually be the person that responds because I still like to be actively involved in what people are interested in learning more about. And as much as I love my team, I tell them all the time, like they may not answer it the way that I would want them to.
Right.
So I still
We
like
will
having
link it
that.
all in the show notes for sure. And I always love to close out our conversation by asking, and it could be related to anything, like what is one drop of one wisdom you like to leave with us today?
Oh, I would say learn how to say no and not have to explain yourself. Like women, as they're learning how to say no, feel like they have to explain themselves. And one of the beautiful aspects of middle age, and as your estrogen declines, you care a lot less about what people think, is that boundaries become really important and the value of saying no. So in my world, unless it's a hell yes, it is a hell no with a couple apostrophes. And so I think for a lot of
Yeah.
women, part of navigating middle age with grace is just learning to discern between like what works for you and what doesn't. And there you can be incredibly gracious and say, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And not
And
feel like
not sorry. I feel like we like to say sorry too much.
yes, you're personally conditioned. And as a former people pleaser that still like, I always feel that like, I don't want to disappoint people. It's like, no, I'm actually protecting my boundaries. And that's
Yeah.
the way that we have to find that reframe to understand. But I would say that is a nugget of wisdom I wish I had learned earlier.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for being with us on the Well Job today. And
Thanks.
we will link everything in the show notes so you can go and check out Cynthia's new book, The Menopause Gut.
Thanks for having me.